welcome back to Patch and Tell. I am your host, Augustus Green, and welcome to the Galaxy Electric channel here on YouTube. What you're hearing is the sound of a Buchla 200 R system with a couple 1979 modules, but mostly the clones. And today we're going to talk about the 245 Sequential Voltage Source, which is one of my favorite modules, and I'm going to explain why, and explain why Buchla, and explain how it's different than some of the other sequencers out there. So I'm going to turn that down so I can explain what's going on here. So we've got the 245 sequential voltage source. We've got the 259 programmable complex waveform generator. And we've got the 281D by Dunnington Audio and the 292C Roman clone. But actually, I take that back. I forgot. It's an SA modular PCB, which is based off of Roman's design. It was originally a Roman design, but I had a mishap with the PCB, so I built another one. I built a lot of this stuff, probably half of it, and I get asked the question often, why Buchla? And I often ask myself, yeah, why Buchla? It's, not an easy thing to be into and to stay into. It's a high maintenance hobby. But there are some really specific reasons that I enjoy the Buchla style. And a lot of it has to do specifically with the designs of Don Buchla himself. Don Buchla was a musical instrument designer. He had experience as a physicist and as an engineer working for NASA, and he also designed what you see in front of me, which are, in some cases real Buchla modules, or a replica of, one of the original Buchla modules that was designed in the 70s. So anyway, we'll talk today about this guy, and what you're hearing is this oscillator and this low-pass gate triggered by this envelope. And so I won't be talking as much about the sound that you're hearing. I'm going to be talking more about what's making it happen and why. Oh yeah, and the 257 dual voltage processor is also involved. I'm using it as an amount knob, basically. And a little bit later we're going to be talking about the source of uncertainty, 266. Cool. So let's get into it. What is the 245? I'm gonna hit stop, and nothing's gonna happen because that's actually controlling it right now. But there's a reason why I did that, and I'm gonna explain right now. So, sequential voltage source is, the 245 is made up of two parts. It has a matrix of 4 CV outputs. It's got 2 outputs per row, so 4 rows of 5 steps. So you got 5 stages, they're called, and you've got 4 rows. And then you'd think, okay, well, I can do, 5 notes, if I want to do a sequence. Why would I want to do 5 notes? Isn't most music, even meter? Yeah, and so this will cover both, which is cool. And there's actually a really interesting way to address the stages, and that's sort of the bread and butter of what I want to talk about. So traditionally, I'm going to connect the pulse to the rows. So you've got like I said, you've got your pulsar section, which is like a clock. And it's completely separate from your rows of CV sources. And you've got a start and a stop button, and you've got affects the rate of the period of the pulsar, and then you've got the length of the period. So this is the difference between a Buchla clock and other systems is this clock actually has two components to it. It's got your initial pulse, which like many things in the Buchla world is not standardized amongst the different types of modules, the different decades and years and systems. But let's just say it's a 10-volt spike, followed by a sustained 5-volt pulse length, and that's where this is the period, and this is controllable here by the period time, and then this is your your actual period in between pulses, and that's time as well, and you can CV control that, which is another way to address the rows, which we'll be talking about more. Now it's also got this white ref, and that's an output, a ramp, a forward ramp. So instead of it being as delicate and nuanced and I guess controllable as the pulse is, this is just a standard. It's called the reference pulse. And the idea is that you could drive another say a sequential source. I could send that to say your source of uncertainty or the 281D envelope pulse ins, and basically just it's a way to clock additional sources from the pulsar, as well as sending the pulse actual rows of CV. That doesn't make sense if you think about bananas as being stackable as much. I mean, it's still cool to have like an alternative pulse that's a little bit different and a little bit more in a lot of ways like robust and stable, but the other reason is bananas, I've just gleaned this through our users group and the Buchla page on Muffwiggler, but I guess bananas weren't always stackable in the Buchla world, or in general, I guess. That would be why a lot of these older, you'll see on my system, they have the black knobs. These are considered the older 200 series modules, but the reason they have multiple bananas, like for here example and here, is because they weren't expected to be stackable. You weren't expected to be able to send the source to multiple places. And then you get into the modern series, that with the 281 and the 292 here on the left. And I was looking at the ones on the right, for example, the older ones, and then the ones on the left here. You've got single bananas for everything. So they were anticipating the stack by the time you got here. So anyway, it's I'm just going to throw out these little Buchla history bits when I can about why the system is the way it is. Now back to the 245. So yeah, you'd be normally used to hearing this would be the way that you would normally hear a sequential voltage source, right? And then you can use these stage selections to lengthen the sequence different. And all it does is turn off that one, and so that it loops at the fourth. but you can trap it, which is cool. So you can almost get like two different 3/4 things happening, or just, you know, kind of like take it into this like improvised mode. So that's fun. But what's really, really cool about this one is the fact that, you know, you actually have this analog here, this input down here, which is a way to address each stage. So if I take this out of the equation, it would be a way to address each stage by way of voltage. So, you know, for example, by plugging it into the preset voltage source, these are just knobs that go from 0 to 10 volts. You know, so if I plug this into the analog in and I turn this knob, it's going to select a different voltage stage depending on the level of voltage. So you could sort of have like manual control of each stage. Now, another way that the module could be used, if you have something like this going on, would be to, you know, use it vertically instead. You know, so you could say, for example, one of these CV outputs to a separate parameter on one of the modules, for example. And then, you know, you could basically have these knobs set differently. And as you scroll through each stage, which will fire a pulse too as well each time one of these stages is addressed. You could have, say, the A section of a song have, you know, one set of settings, and then the B section has a completely different set, and you could just select that in the middle of the song with this, you know, preset voltage source. You could have 5 of them, you know, if you wanted to, 5 different settings for different. You could have a whole set, you know, of presets. Basically, you could use this as like a preset manager and play live, you know, without having to, you know, have, say, like a digital, you know, preset manager. You could use this to save, you know, groups of 4 settings, and, you know, just have like a pretty minimal set saved, you know, this way. But it's just a really cool way to address it. And what takes it even further is that you can, you know, put anything into this input and it'll address those stages. You know, for example, if you wanted to do like a cyclical, you know, waveform from the 281D, for example. So the way that we use the voltage processor is, you know, to basically send the amount of voltage to the analog input that we want from the triangle wave. You know, so as we start to send it voltage, it's ramping up and ramping down between the voltage that I'm allowing to go to the module. So right now it's probably, you know, ramping up and down between like, say, like 0 and 3 volts. And so as I, you know, basically change the rate of that triangle wave, it selects between those two slower, right? Almost acts as like the speed of the clock. And as I start to increase voltage, now what if we didn't want to send the second pulse? We could actually disconnect that one. And it wouldn't get sent, it wouldn't trigger. Because those are literally, you know, ganged together and will trigger upon the stage being selected. So we can put it back in and it'll fire on every. Now let's change the shape. So this basically has the sequence going in reverse. What I've done is turned the attack all the way down, and so we're getting, you know, a different wave shape where the decay cycle is basically forming a decrementing stair step or sawtooth wave. Now if I do the same thing, it will increase, you know, at the rate of the attack. It increases voltage at the rate of the attack, which is, you know, what the function generator does. So it's a really cool way to send voltage to the sequential voltage source and get, you know, as you can get all kinds of wonky things happening as you affect these knobs. Now, what do these rows go into? We haven't talked about that yet. One's going to pitch, so I'm scaling that right there. And the other one is going to the mod index, which affects the rate of pitch modulation in this case. Let's do amplitude modulation instead. So I can basically choose a different accent there. Honestly, my favorite way to use the mod index, for example, is just as an accent. It's a perfect way to, you know, just add a little life to a sequence. Get some cool loopy things happening there. It's also a way to sort of humanize an otherwise static array of tools. Now, there's another way that I thought of to address this, and you'll probably think of more, but and that would be randomly. You know, so you could take the same series of notes, for example, if you want to call them that, and you know, you could apply a pulse, for example, to the random voltage. You can do that here. So let's turn that guy off and turn this on, and that's going to send a pulse. You'll see these LEDs start moving, and now we're ready to send voltage to this from the source of uncertainty. So this is going to fire randomly at the rate of the pulsar. And I have the 218 here, the touch voltage source. I have that set up to transpose the sequence, so to speak. It's plugged into the keyboard input. Oh yeah, and the delay that you're hearing is coming from the 277. I really like it. It was actually a Buchla designed delay that was adapted to these modern times with a modern sound processor. Our friends at MEMS are recreating the original with actual analog shift registers, I believe. Something like that. Analog memory. So it's a fun way to have some random in your system without it being completely random. Like it's scrolling through these 5 voltages randomly. Actually, you know, I'm using this row as well, so it's scrolling through these 10 voltages. But 2 of them are happening simultaneously. I have it in low-pass filter mode instead of, you know, here it is in low-pass gate. And regular gate, which is just your VCA. But, you know, that's all, folks. I just wanted to explore the 245, a glorious sequential voltage source designed by Don Buchla. So long.